Hi, hello. I know what you're probably thinking. Two videos, 2 days in a row, finishing out nostalgia basketball, and then going in right back in the NFL. And the viewers of you that are thinking this, one of you's probably my dad. You're thinking to yourself, did son of a get his life together? Did he finally get things working? Did his wife finally let him have the computer again? Oh my god, he never had a wife? Okay. So Brett Coleman has said when Anthony Richardson got benched that there are coaches coaching for their jobs right now that we aren't even thinking about. And I'll put the tweet up here. And it led me to think what coaches are on the hot seat, what coaches' jobs are on the line. And yeah, I want to talk about that today. There are a lot of factors going into this. How much is their ownership willing to pay for them to get fired? Because ownership still has to pay coaches their contract even if they're fired, unless they get fired for a horrible reason. And there's other things like the seat being hot. That's a tier I did here. Or a tier of there's still a chance they could get fired depending on how the season goes. We are only in week 9. But yeah, this is Son of a Sports. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start with seat is on fire tier. And obviously the cover is Mike McCarthy, so let's talk about Mike McCarthy. It is very clear why his seat is on fire. His contract ends at the end of the year. The Cowboys did not extend him. The Cowboys didn't fire him after the playoff loss, and that shocked a lot of people throughout the league. Some people expected it. Jerry Jones does not fire coaches. He lets them finish their contract. Jerry Jones does a very, very, I'll say conservative owner. He does not make impulsive moves. And McCarthy and this Cowboys team, they're 3-4. Their offense is one of the worst in the NFL because the routes are not right. They can't create separation outside of CeeDee Lamb. There's just so many issues with this offense, and it's not just McCarthy's fault. Dak is probably having his worst year of his career. The running game is non-existent. They have no running back depth. They signed an old, washed Ezekiel Elliott and hoped that was going to fix things, and it hasn't. And an old, washed Dalvin Cook. The receivers, Brandon Cooks has been out, and when he did play, he was running Spencer James routes. Jalen Tolbert has been fine, but he's the only guy that Dak actually can hit in tight windows. CD gets doubled every play. Jalen Brooks, I think that's his name, has not been very good. They refuse to play Ryan Flournoy. Jake Ferguson's their second option, but since he's a tight end, he can't create much space, and he's getting blanketed all the time because you only have to worry about him and CD. It's just his team's not working. Defensively, I won't knock on him too much. I think Jerry made the decision to hire Mike Zimmer, and Jerry is the GM, so Jerry did not bring in pieces over the last few years to help. But McCarthy has had issues as well outside of that. Playoff losses where the Cowboys seem unprepared, where the offense seems like they're not prepared as well. Time management issues, especially in the 2021 playoff loss. There's a lot of things to knock on him about, and I think his time in Dallas is coming to an end. I mean, really, Doug Peterson, this has been coming for a year and a half now, and it just has not worked in Jacksonville. They had a great first year in his tenure. I think he needs to take over play calling and at least prove himself a little bit more before he gets fired. But the big thing here is I do have an ownership tier, and I didn't put him there because I do think ownership is at the point now where they have to fire him. They have to fire him. They have to fire Trent Baalke. They've had too many resources, too many opportunities to get this team right, and they haven't. This team is broken, beyond broken, and it's just not working in Jacksonville. They have a young quarterback that's getting paid a lot of money, that's very good, and they're not winning games. Their defense is bad, and he's not at fault for the defense being horrible, and that's why Trent Baalke should be fired. But he is at fault for just this team's culture just feels shocked, and you can't have a culture change like this with a new or the same head coach that led to this culture being really bad. Matt Eberflus is very clearly on the hot seat now, especially after that Week 8 loss to the Commanders. There are winnable games this year, and it's not all him. He is the defensive play caller, and the defense has been great, and that is something people are going to point to. But it's clear, this team is way too talented to not produce more results than they are. They are putting Caleb Williams in a bad position. And if you go watch Brett Coleman's video, the guy that I used this tweet at the beginning of this, it's clear. They are not doing their jobs properly. They blame players not executing, but coaches put players to execute. Like Brett said, And that is a great point. Shane Waldron was the hire that he had. He got him to be the offensive coordinator for the first overall pick. And that is a big deal. Having a play caller that you trust can do right by your guy, because you can mess up his development with the wrong play caller. You can mess up his future with the wrong play caller. And the team is too talented to look as weak as they have. They made some changes in the offensive line, and they looked better for a few weeks, but they were playing some of the worst defenses in the NFL. They really, really were. And there's the Commanders' loss and the Colts' loss were winnable games. And this Commanders' loss, Eberflus could, he could be excused for the offense playing as badly as they did. But the call to not blitz on the Hail Mary, to have a spy on the quarterback for a Hail Mary, it's one of the worst calls you'll see. And it led to a loss. It led to them fighting for a playoff spot in a competitive NFC. And man, I feel bad, but they needed to change, and he's only won 3 road games in his 3 seasons there. Moving on to the how much is ownership willing to pay tier. And let's start with the guy that is the cover of this, Antonio Pierce. The Raiders are 2-6. Their team is struggling, and there are a lot of reasons for it. I don't agree with their front office decision this past offseason, bringing in the former Chargers GM, Tom Telesco, but they made moves. They did things, and this team should be way better than they are. They drafted players in recent years that should be way better than they are. Tyree Wilson should be a better player. Jackson Powers Johnson should be a better player. Brock Bowers has been incredible, but offensively, you lost Davante Adams. You had to trade him because he didn't want to be there anymore. And a big reason for it, that will probably come out later, is Antonio Pierce and his relationship with him. Antonio Pierce liked Instagram posts insinuating Davante Adams played his last game for the Raiders. Antonio Pierce was hired as a player's coach. And when you let a player leave like that, a star player leaves requests a trade within his first few games of the next season with him, after you give him this contract, that sucks. Max Crosby is in serious trade rumors. Mark Davis had to come out and just say, that's not happening. This team paid a ton of money in the offseason. They've spent resources in recent years. I say ownership willing to pay because Mark Davis, he has a lot of money. $500 million is a massive net worth anyone would be willing to have. In terms of the NFL, though, that is not that much money for an NFL owner, for a sports owner. And he struggled to get the cash last year to fire Josh McDaniels. It was so bad that he was forced to fire him. He was going to fire him after year 1, but he didn't have the money. He couldn't afford it. He couldn't pay a guy 5 years after he was fired to not coach. And it looks like it's going to happen again. Okay. Zach Taylor. And I know a lot of Bengals fans want him fired, and they think he will get fired, and he might. But this is one of the cheapest ownerships in all of football. They're down there with the Joneses and the Mark Davis in terms of how little they spend on this team. A lot of this team's issues have been because ownership won't pay. I don't think Zach Taylor is necessarily a good coach, but a lot of this, and Lou Arunomo has had his issues this year, but there's no one on that defense outside of Trey Hendrickson right now. Sam Hubbard is one of the worst starting defensive ends in the NFL. They've had serious issues across the defensive line. They have lost guys over the last few years. Chidobe Awuzie, Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates is the best safety in football, and he's just gone because they couldn't dig in their pockets. They're going to lose T. Higgins this offseason because ownership won't pay. Joe Burrow's contract is big. Jamar Chase's contract will be big, but Jamar's not even extended yet, and they already lost Tyler Boyd. They've already lost DJ Reader. They already lost Jesse Bates. They already lost Chidobe Awuzie. This team made a Super Bowl 3 years ago. And I'm ranting about ownership, and that's a reason why I don't know if Zach Taylor gets fired. I don't know if they want to move on and pay a coach that actually took them to their first Super Bowl. That is another big issue, but yeah, I think his coaching has played out. I think he's had coaching issues since year 1 there. But the fact that Joe Burrow and company kept winning, it said a lot. And I think last year, him and Brian Callahan did an okay enough job to at least get them close. But at this point in time, like, it's not working anymore. And then there's Dennis Allen. And this one's pretty clear. ownership for the Saints has not been, they've been very conservative over the last few years. They've paid a lot of money, but they didn't fire Mickey Loomis, they didn't fire Dennis Allen, and previous years where they should have been. And Dennis, this is his very clear last chance if this was an ownership that was willing to make moves like that. I think ownership probably would pay, but they don't like making moves. They don't like taking risks like that. Mickey Loomis takes weird risks, like risks that don't work out recently. If you want to talk about the Trevor Penning trade, where you traded a pick that ended up being a top 10 pick the next draft and actually led to the Eagles getting Jalen Carter, that happened. You want to talk about Mickey Loomis overpaying for Derek Carr, or letting the defense get old and pay for more old guys. They struggle to make moves, and they'll be in cap hell again next year. It's interesting, but I think Dennis Allen, they're on a 6-game losing streak after starting 2-0. I thought he was going to keep his job because Kubiak was doing a very good job coaching offensively, but they've lost 6 in a row, and they've had injuries. Yes, Demario Davis missed his first career game due to an injury. Derek Carr's been out for a few weeks. They've had to start a 5th-round rookie. Chris Olave has had his concussions. Jesus Christ, he gets way too many concussions. Rashid Shaheed's out for the year. Alvin Kamara's hand's broken. Cameron Jordan's older and hurt. But it's not working. It just isn't. And the defense has taken a massive decline this year. At a certain point, you have to say enough is enough. And I think that's this point. And let's go into there's a chance tier. Let's start with Nick Sirianni. It's clear that Nick Sirianni is not the best coach. He has serious coaching issues. You're talking about his personality. You're talking about how he beefs with fans, how he gets way, way too immature for a head coach. How his relationship with Jalen Hurts, I'm not going to speculate too much on that. I'm not in that locker room. I'm not a player. I don't play for the Eagles. I'm not personnel for the Eagles. But it's clear there have been rocky moments and this is a coach that is strictly there for his personality. He's not offering much from a football perspective anymore. He gave up play calling halfway through 21, and Steichen took over and put on a masterclass to get that Eagles team to the playoffs in a weak NFC. Then in 22, they made the Super Bowl because their coaching staff of Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, combined with the talent, put on a really good coaching job. And last year, without either one of those guys, that team fell apart, offensively and defensively. And you can blame play calling. You can blame Patricia or Sean Desai or Brian Johnson, but Sirianni's the guy that hired those guys. Sirianni's the one that ended up having to be a huge part of that offense, and he didn't do a good job of coaching it. It's just not working there for a lot of the time. And they've had their struggles this year. They've looked good recently. They just blew out the Bengals. But there's still a chance that he just blows the rest of this year. They were a team that no team ever has won their first 10 games of the season. What was it? 10 out of 11 games of the season, and then not finish with 12 wins. They were 11-6 after starting 10-1. They were a very, very fraudulent team. And I thought he should have been fired last year, but they went and got Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore and rebuilt a staff around him to try to give him a chance to prove himself one more time. But if it doesn't work, if they don't win a playoff game at least, I think he's gone. I think I only made the call to add Dable because there have been rumors this year that Dable could be gone. And I think in this tier 2, there is a little bit of just guessing things, throwing people out there, because the last offseason, Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll and Mike Vrabel, guys, we did not expect to be gone. We're gone. Belichick, there were slowly rumors towards the end of the year, okay, maybe this happens. But Pete Carroll was not expected. Mike Vrabel was not expected. And it happened. Those guys are gone. Those guys are no longer a part of the organizations that they have won, that they went to conference championships with, that 2 of them went to Super Bowls and won Super Bowls with. Belichick became the greatest of all time with. So when I say a coach could be fired for a lot of reasons, Brian Dable has had his rumors on the hot seat. And I don't think he deserves to be. I think he's done a fine enough job. But they haven't gotten their quarterback. I think winning those last 2 years has costed them. They're suffering from success. And last year they were awful and led to the 6th overall pick. But if you don't remember those few games that Tommy DeVito and the defense stepped up, that costed them their chance at what Dable wanted, which was Drake May. And it's very clear. Him and Joe Sheen wanted Drake May more than anything. And they didn't get him. And the previous year, they made the playoffs, so they paid Daniel Jones. And that was an ownership decision. And ownership in New York, John Mara, if you don't remember, is very, very impulsive. Actually, he's not, but he will demand things. He will demand more out of you. And this is a firing that could be out of nowhere. Speaking of impulsive ownership, Shane Steichen. He was just forced to bench Anthony Richardson, and I'm saying forced for a reason. It is very clear this was a call made from upstairs. Steichen probably wanted to remain. Actually, you hear from some people that, hey, Steichen, this was his call. And then you hear from a lot of people, he won't confirm that this was just a decision made. And I think it was Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay is one of the most impulsive owners in sports. He's one of the most demanding owners in sports of power in his team, like Jerry Jones. He will say, I'm patient, I'll wait, I'll let the process play out, I'll let Chris and Shane do their jobs, and then he'll get involved. And he hasn't done it for a while now, it feels like. But, I mean, it feels like as well, Irsay did not like Richardson from the beginning. And Steichen right now has not had the best year coaching. I love Steichen. I think he had a great year last year. I think he was great with the Eagles. But he hasn't been that great this year. And he's in a tough spot because he doesn't want Richardson to get hurt again and run him into where he gets hurt. But against Steelers, he made a dumb call and ran Richardson right after he got hurt and further worsened the injury that he had and knocked him out of a few games. And Steichen has constantly said he wants to remain patient, that he wants to remain, steady with Richardson, develop him. But you don't bench a quarterback after 10 games, and I think Steichen knew that. Maybe not the front office. The front office has had some questions. They're very, very, very conservative. And they're a team that's saying they're win now, but the front office is not making any deals. They're not on the phone. They're a team that has remained just draft heavy only for the last few years, like the Cowboys. But I will say this. If Steichen gets fired, he will get hired immediately by another team. And even if that's just as an offensive coordinator, it will happen. He's a good head coach. It's just this year has been rough for everyone, and Irsay is a very impulsive owner. Okay, let me just start with saying Mike McDaniel, he could be the guy. He could stay and all of that. But this is a rough year in Miami, and I know a lot of Miami fans want a rebuild desperately. They want Tua to retire and they can go rebuild. They don't have to pay Tua. Tua can go sit at home, and he doesn't have to worry about injuries, and they can move on from Tyreek. They can move on and just get out of where they are. They went all in. It didn't work. You move on. Mike McDaniel is very clearly a better coordinator than he is a coach, it feels like. There's so much that's happened in Miami. They paid so much money. They lost so many guys in the offseason. They haven't had the offensive line to work with that they had in recent years. And the offensive line wasn't good in recent years, but they were able to work around it. The play callings have been a little weak. They can't get to their guys, even with other quarterbacks. It's very clear the system is built only around Tua. And you've brought in a lot of people to help him in terms of coaching as well. Anthony Weaver is the play caller this year. Vic Fangio was the play caller last year on defense. He's had help, and it just has not worked. And this ownership in the past has shown they will fire a coach, even if he's winning. And ownership has had the reputation for why he fired Brian Flores. And I agree. That's probably a reason why. I'm not going to say it. You'll just have to, if you know the NFL, you know the NFL. But ownership has shown they will fire a coach even if he's close to winning. And they did ask Brian Flores to lose, and he won. But still, there are so many things going wrong with this Miami team. If they hit a reset button at the end of the year, I wouldn't be shocked. And let me be honest, there will probably be another coach that gets fired that I haven't named. Adam Schefter said 8 coaches are probably going to get fired at the end of the year. And there are a lot of guys around the league that's jobs are on the line. Everyone's job's on the line every year. There's a rumor Kyle Shanahan's job is on the line this year. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this. I'm doing this video, but I know coaching sucks because you can lose your job and you move your family to these places, and I know they're getting paid millions of dollars, but it's still affecting their lives. This is their livelihood. This is their job. They lose their jobs. They have to move. They have to relocate. They have to move their kids from their schools. It sucks all around. This is not a fun part of covering sports. But I wanted to talk about the rumors and just see who might get fired. All right, this is Son of a Sports, and I'll catch y'all next time.